Recording on here. All right, folks. Here it is. By the way, can I just say, where are you? You look like you're in a fucking porn den or something. What is this? The in-laws' house, or is that your home?
This is the in-laws' house. I don't have I don't know, the confidence to pull off a nude painting in my own home.
Is it a nude painting? I can't really see the full painting.
It's a Gustav Klimt, so it is like it's supposedly like highfalutin and very artsy, but I mean this entire room is like a Versace satin heel. It's ridiculous. It's gold, it's red. There's a grand piano in the corner. There's also a 6-foot tall knight, like in a full armored knight in the corner.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So your in-laws have some dough.
They do, yeah. I mean, I've been learning all about that. I mean, talk about like mental health and shit like that. So I've been here since, I would say, March 20th, I think. So we left Brooklyn because we were living in, Crown Heights, and it was kind of, during Corona at least, it was still kind of a hotbed because nobody was listening to social distancing, and we had, a gang of bloods literally living on our front stoop and, dealing small amounts of drugs. So we didn't want to have to walk through those guys every single day. So we kind of hightailed it to the city, and we were able to break our lease, and now we're just kind of here hiding out until we're going to look for a place in August.
Oh, wow. So you're like essentially homeless, like not a homeless person, but without your own home.
Yeah. With a baby, which is, super fun.
Now, where are you guys going to look? Have you thought about Astoria? Sagalow's over here. I'm over here. Veter just had a kid.
I know. I think which looks exactly like him.
Same height.
Just a pocket-sized little Jewish boy. But I think we're looking Jackson Heights.
Oh, okay. That's not.
Yeah. So now far. It's like, it's so weird, dude, because you've known me. I mean, I've known you since I literally started comedy. So I am not an adult, and now I have to consider schools where I move.
Yeah, that's the weirdest part with having kids in New York. It's interesting to have, like, for me, I'm like a suburbs guy. It's
Same.
interesting to me, the idea of like having a kid, and then my kid's like an inner city kid after growing up like in the suburbs or whatever. You're a suburb guy also?
Yeah, I was born in Manhattan, and my parents lived in the West Village for the first, a few months of my life. But I think, and my father had, worked in the city at that time, he was an actor/bartender, and then he became a stockbroker. But I think
he picked up every douchey job along the way.
Dude, absolutely classic. My dad is, that's a whole separate podcast, but he really gregarious, charismatic, fun guy who, didn't necessarily have the work ethic for acting and couldn't stick it out. He had 2 kids, all that stuff, then fled for stockbroking, where he used his charismatic stuff to manipulate people, and then became that kind of hardened douche.
Wow. And is your dad still around?
He's alive. Yeah, he's not really around though. Him and I have a very sordid, history together.
Oh, interesting. Can we get into it?
Yeah, of course. Is sordid just sexual?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of words. I mean, like you said, we know each other. There's a lot of words that I just use because I've heard them in movies. And then I think I'm just completely like the word terse.
Yes.
I don't know what it means. I've been saying it for a long time.
I know it doesn't mean this, but I think of it as like a tight-lipped, like you're changing your lips. I think that's purse, not terse.
Yeah, well, terse, I just know, like, it's also jokes. A lot of words I knew from bits. Like, there was a guy, Ben Boym. Did you ever run across Ben Boym, comedian in New York?
Yes, yeah. He did that Hostel show before Hershon and I got it.
Yeah, he was a good guy. I don't know where he is, if he's around, but I started with him, or he was before me, but in Boston, he was around. But he had a joke. When I was new, I started when I was 18 and fresh out of high school. I didn't know anything about anything. And he said, I can't remember the joke, but he said blowjob emporium in the joke. And for like 10 years, I thought emporium was like a dirty word. I thought it meant like a whorehouse or whatever the fuck. And then I would see like food emporium, and I'd be like, what? How do they just name it Food Emporium? That's crazy. I'm like, I thought that meant cum or whatever.
Right. Yeah, it was just a salacious way to sell deli meats.
Yeah, because I've learned so much of just like picking things up from shows and movies and then just being like, okay, great, that word kind of means that. But the word terse, Don Gavin had a joke where he talks about being in the waiting room for too long and they don't go in order of importance. And he's like, yeah, I think I'm next, but that guy with the hatchet in his arm seems a little terse. So I thought it meant like put out, which maybe it does.
I think, yeah, it may. I don't know. I worked with Don in Aruba, and that guy is one of my favorite human beings of all time.
Oh, an amazing comedian. He's got an album, if you want to go laugh your ass off after this, called Live with the Manhattan. And he's amazing.
I mean, him and I, like, I was actually newly not drinking at that point in Aruba. I think I was like 3 or 4 months not drinking, and Don is the exact opposite of that. He's just never going to stop. So we had like some real heart-to-heart moments about alcohol. We spent time in the airport together, like before we each left Aruba, and then I ran into him at the stand like 3 months ago, and he couldn't know me less.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that you gotta meet. Like, I started up there, and I always wanted that guy to know me and like me and respect me. You know how like in comedy, there's so many guys you're just like, I just would give anything for that guy to know my name. Yeah. And it was one of those guys you'd have to be like, remember I opened for you, I did the joke about the thing, you complimented, but eventually now I think he's like come around and knows me.
That's awesome.
But so I'm all over the place now because I wanted to talk about your dad. But so you quit drinking now.
Yeah, I mean, I originally did it as kind of a in solidarity with my wife when she was pregnant, and just like, you're not drinking. I also could probably use a break. At the time I don't think I was at full capacity alcohol, like where, I've gone through phases where I was like, pedal to the metal, going crazy, drinking every day and just like raging. And then I'd kind of even out and be, a quote unquote healthier drinker. But at that point I was like, I just need 7 months to kind of dry out regardless. And then after I was like, it's full vanity. I was like, well, I kind of like being thin and not hungover. This is great.
Yeah. I mean, so you feel clear-headed, clear-eyed a little bit, as much as you can with anxiety.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's helped me. I don't know. I don't know if I feel less anxiety. I think I just feel less panicked. Like, so I have the anxiety, but it's a little bit more manageable. Whereas before, if it was post drinking, especially, because I think you talked a lot about that on one of your albums, but like you couldn't deal with the anxiety that came after boozing. You drink to alleviate the anxiety, and then the floodgates open right afterwards. And that was the case with me, is like the next day I'd be a shivering mess, double, second guessing every single action, every word, who I spoke to, wondering if I said anything shitty to a comic I looked up to or anything. It's just like, it just wasn't worth it. Yeah, completely. Those moments of like piecing together conversations and then being like, I think I said, "You're a god" to Dave Attell, and I'm not sure, or whatever thing it is, where you're like, shit, I think I said something. One time, this is so embarrassing. I don't think I've ever even told this story, but this is when I first started opening for DePaulo, like way back in 2006. And I was like taking notes for his joke. He didn't ask me to, but I was just like writing down jokes, and I was drunk, and I wrote like, you could say this, or this line's great. And then like on the back, I wrote, "Best I've ever seen," ... And then like I purposely handed him the note folded with that on the side. Like I was kind of like, oh, whoops. Did I write "Best I've ever seen" on there? And like he never like addressed it to be like, what is that? Like I'm sure maybe he read it and it meant a lot to him. Like, I don't know. I try to put myself in his place. Like maybe if a young comic handed me a note and it said that, but in my mind I'd be like, get out of here, you fucking idiot. But I like wanted him to be like, dude, you're the best, man. Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah, I have those fantasies all the time. I had kind of a moment like that drunk with Louis, weirdly enough, at Caroline's. This is right around Hurricane Sandy when he was hosting Saturday Night Live. Do you remember that, when like everything was closed down and then things kind of started opening, and Caroline's like ran a show when, half the city's electricity was still off and they had like 15 people or something like that. This is...
Sorry.
Bless you.
I get nervous when I hear about hurricanes.
The funniest part is I saw that sneeze coming for the last 35 seconds.
Yeah, I was wondering, I was seeing my face in the monitor. I'm like, does he think I'm having like a really adverse effect to this story? Like I'm clutching my dress and
I was just powering through. But this is how long ago this was. DeStefano was hosting at Caroline's, and I was just going just to get out of the house because everything had been shut down, and we both had like dragonflies or snapdragons at Ruby Foos before, so we got like real shit faced on like super girly drinks. Went to Caroline's. I wasn't on or anything like that, but they were going to give me a spot. And then at some point, Chris ran over to me, and he's shit-faced hosting, and he runs over and he's like, "Hey, dude, we're going to have to like, you were going to be next, but we're going to push you back one." And I'm like, "Okay." And he goes, "Yeah, because..." And he like did this, over exaggerated head nod. And sure. I look, and literally, 5.5 inches from his face was Louis. So Louis probably heard everything he had said. And Louis, at that time, top of his game, everybody loved him, all that stuff. And he couldn't have been nicer, where he was like, "Hey man, I'm only going to do 10 minutes. Is that okay?" And I think I said something like, I was drunk, but I was like trying to be friends with him, I guess. And I was like, "What, are you fucking kidding me?" And he goes, "Huh?" And I'm like, "I'm kidding, do an hour." And he's like, I just saw him like try to process what I was doing, and I just immediately turned around and walked in the other direction. I couldn't face him.
It sucks, and it's so embarrassing because you always think you're being fun. And I remember like years and years ago, like 2002, I was like 2 years in, and I used to come down to New York and do bringer shows, which is when you have to bring people to get on stage. So there'd be like, I would drive down with like 4 friends just to do a set at Stand Up New York. And I remember it was like Mark Maron was on the show.
Oh, wow.
And this is like 20 years ago. It was way before the podcast and everything. But I remember like he was like the guy closing the bringer show. And I remember being like this, "Hey, I'm opening for you tonight. I'm opening for Mark Maron or something." And he was just like, "Yeah, okay." And I remember like then later, I'd be the guy closing a bringer show, and they'd be like, "Cool to open for you." And I'd be like, "Shut up, you nerd." And then you're just like, "Oh, I was that guy." Like,
yeah. There's
so many jokes you made to these guys that were just like, "What? Shut up."
Dude, it's brutal because the more you go through it as you're, as the person that they were, you realize how absolutely brutal you were.
Completely. And just embarrassing. And then being like, I've told the story. I think I talked about it on this podcast already, but like I saw Philip Seymour Hoffman at the bar one time, and I walked up to him drunk and just started reciting lines from a movie he was in. Oh, no. And then I started being like, "I'm friends with Patrice O'Neal," and he's like, "I don't know who that is," because they were in like one scene together in 25th Hour. And there was, anyways, the point is there was just so much like shame around like saying the dumbest shit, which when you're young, you're saying dumb shit anyway, even without the drinking.
Right. And then you have the green light. Like booze gave you the green light to be like, "No, all of your ideas are good."
Completely. We were just talking about that. I was talking to, without getting too weird, like other sober people, and they were just saying like, we were kind of sharing about our sobriety, and my friend was like, "Yeah, when I was drinking, I had no good ideas." And I started laughing so hard at the idea of like the things that you did when you were drunk started as ideas. So like, right. An example of one of my ideas was to be like, "I'm going to go jump on that person's windshield until it breaks." That was like an idea. I was like, "Guys, I got an idea. I'm going to take a shit on the floor in this house." That's my best idea I have.
Do you think that was an actual idea, or was that just an impulse?
No, I think that I thought I was at a toilet or something. I don't think I was like, "This will be hilarious."
Because I put on a company party once, and I guess this actually was an idea, but I was an office manager for an advertising company, like right when I first started comedy. And my job was to be the CEO's personal assistant. I was the office manager. I also was his like realtor at one point. I had to like rent out his 2,000 square foot apartment in Brooklyn. I had to, start or organize all the holiday parties. And so I did this crazy holiday party. I put it together under this insane budget that should have never worked. And of course I celebrated by getting blacked out the moment the party started. And like an hour and a half in, I was just pissing on the wall of the W.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And people were like, "I think it's time like for you to go."
And how old were you?
I was 24.
Yeah, that's tough. Sometimes I think the drinking age should be like 30. Mm-hmm. And then it ends. It's like 30 to 40. It's like a purge. You can just go nuts in your 30s, and then that's it.
I'm torn on that though, because I didn't drink until I was 20, 21. Like I literally did not drink in high school. I was that guy at fucking parties that played sports and drank at it like orange juice out of a carton. I was still wildly outgoing because I fancied myself as funny, but you know, I probably wasn't. But you know, it was just I think I picked up at such a pace and I didn't know what I was doing, where everybody else that had been drinking since they were 13 was like, easy there, idiot. You have to sip.
Yeah, I have a very similar story. I did not drink through high school. My first drink was in October of 2000. I know that because I went to Montreal to see Pearl Jam. And my first drink was a Midori Sour. But I was the same way. Like I was pretty outgoing and had a good time in high school. Now I want to get into anxiety because I know you're like a severe anxiety guy. Yes?
Yeah.
You've gotten better?
Yeah. I think I've gotten a little bit better because, and honestly, thanks to you and a lot of the stuff that you talk about, and I've asked you for book recommendations that I've also picked up, and a lot of that stuff, it's hard because it's like you need to have the constant reminder. You know what I mean? It's almost like, I mean, we spoke a little bit about it before, but about, you know, mushrooms have also helped me quite a bit, but mushrooms also dissipate. The lesson that you learn from the hallucination kind of fades after a while, and that's why people do it again and then again after a while. It's almost like a redouching of your soul. But there are times where I just like, you know, where I have it on lock, or I think I do, and then I get lazy with the upkeep, and then it kind of piles back up.
Yeah, well, that's, first of all, I'm glad to hear I was been helpful in any way, but that's the thing, is it's a part of you, and it's weird. Like it's sort of like, I think Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this a little bit. Eckhart Tolle will talk about it. It's part of that wants to survive. It's like this thing inside of you that a lot of them say to kind of embrace as like its own being, like a child that you hug and hold close to you, but like it wants to survive. So like it will come back. Anxiety doesn't just permanently go away. You have to constantly be mindful, and through meditation and connecting with friends or religion or whatever it is, or mushroom, like you have to stay on top of that shit because it wants to survive, and it will survive. It is part of you. It doesn't go, it's not like a thing that you just defeat and you're like, great, that's cleared up.
Right. It's also not something I knew what it was until like late in college, even after college, because I come from like an Irish Catholic family, and I didn't know that mental illness runs rampant in my family until like 5 years ago. I mean, my grandpa put like his service revolver in his mouth in front of all 8 of his kids and his wife, and I didn't find out about that until half a decade ago.
Wow, that's the most Irish thing ever.
Yeah, right. He went to an asylum, got doped up, and like laid on the couch for 2 years. And this is just like, I feel like I'm, you know, gay for having a stomach ache of anxiety my whole life, and I have nobody to talk to because nobody let me know that that's normal.
Wait, so did he pull the trigger? Did he kill himself?
No, he did not. No, he put it in his mouth and threatened to kill himself in front of all of his kids, and then I guess I haven't heard the full details of the story still through my dad. He's never told me. My older sister kind of gave me the cliff notes and basically said, I think one of his partners came and like talked him out of it. And then they checked him into a hospital. And he, you know, back then it was probably the 70s, maybe 60, you know, late 60s. And they didn't know what medicine was or how to really, you know, treat certain things. So they just doped him the fuck up.
Jesus, I'm so grateful. And I want to get into another topic along these lines. I'm so grateful that we are in a time where there's tons of books and information and like neuroscience about mental health, because that would have blown to even be around like 30 years ago, 25 years ago, where people were just like, I don't know, I think you're gay. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, just like, I've gotten really into stoicism, which I talked about on last week's episode. I've gotten like really into this sort of religion. Sorry, my nose is running all of a sudden. I sneezed and now I got the drizzles. I feel like a cokehead here, but
that's quite all right.
But I'm getting really into stoicism, which is hard for me to say. But there's a book called A Guide to the Good Life by William Irvine, which I highly recommend. I'm in the middle of reading it now. And their whole thing is all about gratitude and only controlling what you can control. It's very similar, a lot of stuff that's similar to Buddhism, but a big part of their thing is negative visualization. So to kind of wake up in the morning and spend a little time, don't ruminate on it, but the idea that anything all the bad things that could happen. And then you kind of allow yourself to think about that. And then you feel grateful for that those things haven't happened. And the reason that made me think of that is like the idea that we could, and they talk about this in the book, like imagine being your what do you call it, ancestors who didn't even have windows in their fucking house, or they had to wait till the summer to have fruit. You know what I mean? It's just like, wow. And it just allows you to feel grateful. Like, I'm glad I have an air conditioner and a blanket or all that shit. So
100%. Yeah.
And you can think about like the idea of like, my wife could get fucking hit by a car and die tonight. And you take a moment to be like, think about what that would be like. And then you can come back to be like, hey, great. My wife's in the other room. I'm going to go give her a big hug and be grateful for her being here. Maybe.
See, I feel like that would be really useful for me. Well, that was a loud firework. I feel like that would be really useful for me if I could get off of the negative feelings. Like sometimes I do that where I give it a little room to breathe, and I do contemplate in an effort to kind of, flush it out of my system, but it'll linger for a while. And sometimes with my brain, especially, I'm prone to jumping ahead and thinking about future events that have yet to happen. And of course, every future event then leads to a decision, and my brain takes the negative route. So each decision, I then go negative and then more negative, and it spider webs into like a full-on event that is made up in my head, but I'm now like wearing it as almost like a heavy blanket all day.
Yeah, that's what I've had through most of my life. Exactly. And I feel like we have very similar kind of anxieties and panic. But now I guess maybe it's actually nice to hear, because it makes me think like, oh, that's actually good that I've gotten to a place in my life mentally that I am able to think about bad things happening without ruminating on them. Mm-hmm. But the thing that's changed for me the most is my therapist saying, and this getting through this idea, and like you said earlier, alluded to, is like you have to hear these things a million times, but the idea of like my thoughts are not reality and fear is just fear. I've had to make that my fucking, whatever you call it, my not omen. What's that fucking word?
Mantra.
Yeah. And I've had to make it just when I was sounding smart, I sound like an idiot. My mantra of like, that's just fear. And also going back to the Stoicism and Buddhism to some degree is like, I can't control that. That's something I can't control of what happens to whatever. There's only like with having a child, you can be the best father you can be, but there's a lot of stuff you can't control if they get sick or, whatever.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're kind of like the more I'm, I've been a dad now for like 11 months, but and my son is now becoming a person. Like he's starting to be mobile. He has a personality. He's just about to start walking. So that's going to be a completely new thing. But being a parent is kind of just waiting for a disaster. Like everybody has a disaster story. You know what I mean? Like when I was a kid, I threw a deflated beach ball at my sister's front bike tire and she did a front flip over the handlebars and like cracked her chin open. And that's just one injury that we experienced that my parents were just, it just got sprung on them. And there's countless others, everybody's been hurt. Everybody's had emergencies. Everybody has those events happen. So I'm now, for an anxious guy like me, to know that those things are bound to happen. It's both good for the mental health because it does really, it teaches impermanence and you have to let things go and it's out of your control and it's you have to be in the now and really appreciate and enjoy exactly what's happening. But it does have a lingering bit of like, oh shit, I gotta really be on my toes.
Yeah, well, that's where it's like there's that balance of being as cautious as possible, but also not holding on to the steering wheel too tight, because it's like then you turn into a helicopter parent or whatever the hell, and then you make the kid too anxious, which is what I experienced a little bit, is this idea of overprotection, where then it becomes this thing of like, now because you're that way, the kid becomes that way. My mother was so anxious and OCD that now I feel that way. I'm always freaking out. But that is an interesting thing, is like that's just part of life. And I know you're using the word disaster because it's a good word, but it's also like, well, was it a disaster? Your sister's still alive. She survived. The kid's going to break his leg, but he'll be fine or whatever. But I have similar thoughts. I think about that all the time. Removed from Stoicism, just my natural brain is like, I'm going to bleed again. There's no way I've bled for the last time. Like at some point I'm going to be bleeding. That's weird. I'm like, what are the chances I'm like not going to get stitches again? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I mean, or stuff like that. Like I'm going to have a headache again. And then ultimately you're like, we are going to die, which is strange.
It is. It's really strange, but I don't know. I've almost made peace with that more than life, which is a weird thing because, death to me, and this is, of course, this is me saying this right now and it could change in a week, but it feels like a vacation. Like that's almost like a nice thing where it's like, all right, this is all over. I will never have anything to worry about again. Obviously, I have way more to live for now with a son and a family and all that stuff. And I would, if I had the conscious ability to miss what I'm missing out, I obviously would. But, the idea of all of worry just dissipating and all of this, earthly shit just being done for, a part of that is relaxing. Yes,
I get that. And it's a weird feeling. It reminds me of Gary Gulman has the great joke where he says, the thing about life is it's every day. It's such like a great bit. And like one of the best jokes ever of like that. It is like the idea of like, having to put my shoes on and fucking wipe my ass. But this is like stoicism where you think about dying, that you never get to do any of those things again. So even the most remedial, another word I don't know what it means, even the most whatever tasks, like you think about, contemplate that there'll be a time where you go to the dentist for the last time.
Yeah.
Like if someone was like, you're going to die, like you're never going to go to the dentist again, part of you would be like, oh, bummer. Like no one wants to go to the dentist, but like there's something about the feeling of leaving, and there'll be the last time you turn the air conditioner on or say goodnight to your wife or whatever.
Right.
So it does, contemplating that kind of stuff does make you grateful of like, man, I kind of can't wait to go to the dentist, knowing that eventually I'll die and never get to do anything again.
Bobby Kelly has that really great bit that made me think of that, and I think Aziz did a version of it on his special, but where he was saying like, I have 30 summers.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And it's such a beautiful thing to like really, it just completely captures everything you think about when you put it like that. And it's only the number 30. It's not 100. It's not 80. It's nothing high up. It's 30. That just like, that could really, bring you down to earth.
Yeah, it can fuck with you. It's interesting because I'm kind of saying these things about imagining death and contemplating death, but it's only because I've managed to get to a much better place mentally, because these are the same things that before in my 20s would fuck me up for like 3 weeks. Of like, God, I don't want to die and bird flu and all this shit. So I guess it makes me feel grateful in this moment that I've gotten to this point. But that reminds me of another conversation with Shane Moss, another comic who does, a lot of podcasts, talks about science and mushrooms.
He's a
and all
smart
stuff.
Dude.
Yeah, very smart guy. But I remember years ago when we were hanging out and drinking, I was like, God, I was always this guy when I was drinking. I was like, doesn't it suck that we're going to die? Like right in the middle of a hang, I would always say that. And I always remember this. It felt so wise at the moment. He's like, it would suck worse if we didn't. And just in that moment, the thought of being like 280 and going to the dentist for the 5 millionth time or whatever, or just being old and your bones dying, like you're like, I guess it is better that we do die.
Yeah. Oh, dude, the book Tuck Everlasting did that for me. Like that was like a book we had to read in 4th grade summer or whatever. It was about a family that drank from a stream and they are now stuck in like locked in the age where they drank it and just they can't die, all that stuff. And they had there was the whole lesson was just like, embrace mortality. It's a beautiful thing. It is a fleeting, almost shooting star moment that we get to be, experience life. And it's, if you living forever is just not all that it's cracked up to be or what you may think it might be.
No, and not just that we get to live. Now, this is up for debate now because I think social media is destroying the fabric of our brains and society and all this shit. But we do get to live in a time where like most of the time we're sleeping in air conditioning if it's hot and heat if it's cold. We have blankets. We have TV and books, and we have access to a lot of information. And with the positive side of the phone is I can text with a lot of people. I can keep in touch with a lot of people. I'm trying to do my best to. I deleted Twitter off my phone, but then after a day of that, I realized I can just go on the internet browser and look at Twitter. So it's like, oh fuck, I'm back to. How are you with social media? Are you obsessed? Are you in there? Is it a problem, or you managed to be okay with it?
It's a total problem. It's I mean, I'm locked in. I have a very, and this has grown over time. It wasn't always my problem, but I have a very bad case of caring too much what people think.
Same.
Especially my peers, like comedians. I mean, I am constantly making up conversations that other comedians are having about me, all the time, and none of them are positive. It's always negative, and it's always just secretly what I feel about myself, or what I'm worried that people will, find out about my actual shattered personality.
Sure. Yeah, I completely agree. First of all, I think you're great. Big fan. And, but yeah, no, I have the same thing all the time, constantly having arguments. I'm worried about what everybody thinks, which is a losing battle. It's something I'm consciously working on. And it's no way to live, but that's what draws you to social media, to see what people are saying and if people are saying things. And it's horrible. And I have these moments. I tweeted something like this recently, but I'm like, I already know that if I'm fortunate enough to die on a deathbed of like saying goodbye to friends and family and looking back on my life, my biggest regret will be the time that I spent on social media, and also the time I spent worrying about what people who aren't even really in my life are thinking about me.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. There's no way we're going to be appreciative of like what Instagram did for us.
Right. I mean, and Instagram's the best one.
I know.
Instagram, at least I'm like, I take good photos and I'm sharing joy. I mean, Twitter is nothing but fucking garbage.
It's super evil. And even like, I mean, even the positive, it's so vitriolic, and everybody is so aggressive and so angry, and it can really, for me, I shouldn't say for anybody else, but it like poisons my well. Like I can read just a few things back and forth, different takes on certain political, social, whatever, and it's all cookie cutter. It exists anyway, but then you reaffirm it by reading it, and it just sours me. And it sucks. I don't know why I do it. It's almost like digital cutting. Like I'm doing it to feel something.
It's a perfect analogy. It's exactly right. It's like you're like, shit is on there, shit's happening, and it makes me sick to even be part of it. And that's why I felt so good about deleting it. And then a bunch of shit came up, and so I'm like, let me check that out. I got to hear about this. And it's gross. And the only way I have such fantasies about just jumping on my phone and smashing it to pieces, and like quitting comedy and like moving to Wales. Like I went hiking last year in Wales, and Sarah and I were just like, this is amazing. I just want to buy like an old brick house with a little tube chimney thing and a billow of smoke and a big fluffy dog. And has
this made you think of like commune, like or anything like that, or like get the hell out?
Yeah, I mean, like I hear about like retreats and Zen Buddhist things where they hit you with a stick and whatever. I'm like, that sounds great to me, to go and like silent retreat for a month or whatever and just cleanse myself of this. The problem is, Sarah and I always joke about this, when you're in a relationship and you do that, your spouse is always like, wait, what? Like something seems, it never feels good for the spouse to be like, and I'm like, no, it's not you, it's social media. But like, no one's ever like, yeah, our marriage is going great, I'm going to go take a 90-day don't talk to anybody retreat.
Yeah. I mean, it's also them. That's like, so I've been wrestling with that as well, because social media, I'm trying my best to now post and then get the fuck off and like, don't be so accessible. But part of me again is like, I pride myself on trying to on working really hard and being accessible to the people that listen and like my stuff, and wanting to keep them engaged and being a good person by just communicating with these people, because I think it's it's like fair trade. I don't feel above anybody. If somebody tells me that what I do means something to them, I want to say, hey, thanks, that means a lot. But then the trade-off is everybody that calls me a lib cuck retard or whatever also has that much access to me. So it's it's also weird juggling it with a kid, because I have a son and a wife who truly have unconditional love for me. Like they love me for who I am. My kid has no idea that I have a single fault. He is just super into me as his dad. And I'll look at this perfect baby that has this love for me, and then I'll go on social media in search for love.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. I do the same exact thing. Like my wife is in love with me, and we share a life and a soul, and we sit here. It's like beautiful. And the same thing. I'm like, look what this fucking guy said. Look at this. Like, it's just like, what? It's insane. And then even like everything, the positive dissipates so quickly, and the negative lingers. Where I have like emails from this podcast, I have emails that are like the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me, like long, thoughtful emails, which I appreciate. But it's quick. I'm like, wow, that's really beautiful. Anyways, let me go, go do something. And then someone will be like, yeah, you fucking suck. You think you're Larry David? You fucking piece of shit or whatever. And I'm like, shit. Like, I just ruminate on that. Ruminate, I only kind of know what it means. I'll just think about it for years. Like, there are like tweets that I remember from like 6 years ago where I'm like, you son of a bitch.
Well, because, I think you're exactly the same, is that I expose myself online, like, and I've done that for better or worse my whole comedy careers. I grew up listening to Opie and Anthony and Tough Crowd and all that stuff, and everybody preached honesty and being raw and being just so open about your faults that it's like, that's what real comedy is. So I just did that. And then I realized I was giving the keys to my insecurities to psychopaths.
That's exactly right. And I wondered, like, do you ever think, I'm like, man, I wonder if I could do it over again if I wouldn't talk about being a drunk and having herpes and being insecure and all this stuff of like, maybe I could have just been like a Stephen Wright or Joe Mackey, who's like, there's no personal stuff, but just brilliant joke writers. But it's hard. I don't know. You're probably like me. It's hard for me not to just be like, yeah, here's what's going on with me. I don't know. It's scary. Like, and I think part of that's like my anxiety is I'm just like, let me just tell everybody about it, and maybe someone will have some advice for me. That's kind of been my thought process.
That's perfect. And Maron has this really great quote where he said, stand-up comedy is the way for a comedian to control why people are laughing. You know, where it's like, so it's not, you know, what they're laughing at. They're always laughing at us, but it's like, it's why, you know, we're giving them the information to laugh at us. So we're kind of siphoning out what we feel is okay for them to laugh at, so we can kind of control the environment a little better. Interesting.
Yeah, it's totally, it's funny because did you listen to Seinfeld on Maron?
I'm like 3/4 through. It's tough to listen to pods, man. I'm just, you know, I'm neck deep in fucking kid shit all day, so it's difficult to just be like, sit this one out for an hour. I gotta listen to Jerry.
Well, they talk a little bit about what makes you funny, and Jerry sticks with his thing of like, if you're funny, you're funny, and it's a little frustrating. Yeah, because Mark wants to talk a little more, I guess, intellectually or scientifically about it. But when you really think about it, you're like, it's definitely clearly a defense mechanism of like that old thing when you're a kid, like, let me make fun of this before they can make fun of this.
Right. Well, he had that great line. So I got to the part where he talked about his parents being orphans, which I never knew. Either. And then he had that great line where he was talking about how he was like, no, they wanted to live their life and they told me to live mine. Like, where he had almost an isolated childhood, and it's like, oh, there it is. There it is. There's everything. Yeah,
that's the thing too with Jerry. You're like, you're smart enough to recognize that would have some sort of effect on you. Your parents being really distant, which it seems like that's what we have in some way. That kind of Irish, just not physical distance, but maybe emotional distance.
Yeah, totally. My mom became communicative and open about her feelings after my parents got a divorce, which was during college. So it took maybe until I was 20, even 25, 26, 27, around that time, for my mom and I to sit down and her to apologize for a lot of how she handled my childhood. Because she was like, you know, I got hit as a kid, you know, not like overwhelmingly. I didn't go to schools with, you know, welts on my back or black eye or anything like that. But that was how I was how I was punished. You know, I got hit by both of my parents, and only my mom has since spoken about how that was an incredibly wrong thing for her to do. And it was a byproduct of how she came up. And, you know, she just did some soul searching and kind of got to the bottom of her personal trauma and, you know, opened up to me about that. And I've never been more appreciative of anybody in my entire life than that. Like, I love that she had the willingness to do that.
Wow. I mean, that is like powerful. Because was she in therapy? Did a therapist tell her to do that, or did she just do that on her own?
I don't know at the time, to be honest. She may have been in therapy, but I think, you know, she was married to my father for 25 years, and both of them, you know, my dad is a staunch, still to this day, does not believe in therapy. Like, my dad doesn't believe in therapy so much that he went to therapy with my younger sister and mother, and within 3 minutes was screaming 3 inches from the therapist's face about how much he doesn't believe in therapy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, that's kind of my lineage. But my mother grew up, again, like, you know, repressed Irish Catholic. She went to Catholic school her entire life, and like the Catholic school where like the nuns would hit them. So she had corporal punishment both in school and at home. She was getting hit by her mother, you know, so all this stuff kind of subconsciously influenced her parenting, because I think she set out trying to be different, but without the help of therapy while she was parenting, or even getting to the bottom of where that stuff came from. It, you know, it creeped out.
Wow. That is like so fascinating to me, to like have a parent. That's like in the dream in some ways for a lot of people, to have, maybe I'm projecting, to have a parent come up and be like, I'm really sorry that we did this way. I mean, did that help your anxiety at all? Did you feel any kind of relief or just emotion? Like, I feel like I would start sobbing if that happened, if my mother did that.
I did. I mean, I'm a big crier. I cry a lot.
Hell
so,
yeah.
you know, I mean, that's one good thing about social media is I am constantly watching, you know, videos of somebody ringing the cancer bell for the last time, or like a soldier coming home, you know, that kind of stuff. I am just, you know, tear porn I'm constantly watching. But I remember it meant a lot to me. It was everything. And now thinking back on it and having years to process what that means for her to both do that, what it meant for our relationship and how we've progressed since, and the fact that my father has not done that. And I've asked him to, and I've, you know, and we've had blowout fights and really just long stretches of not talking mixed in with violent encounters and all this stuff. And he refuses to acknowledge any kind of, really anything, any part in why I'm fucked up.
Wow. But it's interesting, because that still seems to me somehow, like, maybe I'm wrong, but somehow positive to even like have it out with your father, to have like that you have it in you to confront your father is really impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, no, go ahead.
I mean, I've set out, and this has been my whole life. There are two things that I set out to do. Is one, this is true, I don't want to be fat. Like, that is like a big motivator in my life, because my whole dad's side of the family are just like over 6'3" and like 250 plus, just absolute behemoth Irishmen. And so I wanted to break the chain with that. And I also wanted to break the chain with healthy conversation about our feelings. And I wanted to like I think that's part of why I do it on podcasts. It's part of why I do it on comedy, because like hopefully my son is like, the pendulum kind of re-swings in the middle a little bit, and he kind of rights the ship a bit, because I think I took what my dad and mom went through and I slammed it the complete opposite way in a very extreme speed.
But
you know,
that seems good. I mean, it seems like progress at least, and it's good that you're connected. It seems like you're connected emotionally to these things, which seems like a positive to me.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've been to therapy. I'm trying to go back also now, actually, to your fella. I emailed him, offered to send him a tape if he needed to see it. But
Alan, I was going to ask, are you an Alan guy? But I guess not.
So I went to the other Alan, other comedies Alan, who was like the open mic Alan. I got wrecked to him through Justy Dodge like years ago, and he was great. He helped me through a lot. I had. And I'm actually re-experiencing a bunch of anger stuff. Yeah. So but at the time it was manifesting in destructive ways. So I was going back to like high school shit where I was punching holes in fucking, the door and stuff. And it's like, I can't be doing that if I'm in my mid to late 20s and I'm trying to be a grown up human being. It's like, it's not something I felt comfortable with. So I think once I just like punched through the bathroom door and like pulled out my hand and immediately texted the therapist.
Jesus, that's like a scene out of a movie. That's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it helped me. I think just being willing, that was huge.
By the way, now I'm not crying. I don't know what's going on. My eyes are like itchy or burning. I don't know what the hell. There's something in my bedroom. Maybe it's the vibrator.
It sounds like, yeah, you have allergies.
Yeah, and like I don't know. There's allergies in my bedroom. I don't know what's going on. I got a lot of anxiety. It could just be anxiety symptoms. But
this room I'm in is also like 400 degrees.
Oh, this one also is. Yeah, I'm sweating my ass off. I think that might be it. I might just have sweat in my eyeballs from sitting in a hot room because I can't turn the AC on. But that's interesting too. I think about this a lot because I've been learning a lot about formative years, which I keep talking about. And this thing of, I heard this quote, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So when we're reacting to anything, whether you're getting angry or punching a hole in the wall or crying or whatever it is, your reaction was built in your first like 6 years of your life. You're reacting the way you learned to react then. So I guess maybe just open question, but like, do you have stress or anxiety or excitement about how you have a kid now who's about to be 1? Happy first Father's Day, by the way.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, it was a weird day. So I played golf this morning at the golf course because I'm home. I'm in my hometown, but I grew up next to my wife. So we, being here, I'm in where, I'm where I grew up. It's crazy. And then I played golf today randomly at the golf course my father and I used to go to, which was the only place we ever hung out. I picked up golf just to be like pals with my dad.
Wow.
And then on my first Father's Day, I played golf there and then, had a nice day with my kid.
Wow. So, but do you feel the pressure? Are you aware that like your child is now in their formative years and like when your kid is 48 and, someone cuts in front of him in line and he's like, you fucking dumb cunt or whatever. Like that's happening now. He's learning that like today. Is that pressure or something you think about or like what? I think about that. I don't have a kid and I think about that.
It's definitely something I think about. It's also more so now that he's becoming a true sponge. I mean, his eyes are open. He's barely blinking and he is absorbing everything. And there's mannerisms that I do and not realize that he's already mimicking. So when he started doing that, I immediately, even jumping into this, I knew I wanted to be a better father than my dad was. I knew I wanted to be, like wildly communicative, open about everything. I wanted to, I want to have truthful conversations about our past, as a family and like in terms of mental illness and some of the stuff that we have to deal with. And I want to be really open and honest with them. And, but like you said, this is the formative time. So you want to almost instill those lessons without confusing them with words. If I just lay a bunch of stories on my fucking 3-year-old kid, he's just going to be horrified and not understand what I'm talking about. But if I show him that I can argue with his mother by talking and actually like, progressing through thought and getting and open communication and with love and understanding, then that is the lesson.
Right.
So I'm just trying my best to, to live how I wish my dad did or how I wish my environment was.
That's great. And I think that's all you can do. I mean, it goes back to like the thing you learn when you're a kid of like treat other people the way you want to be treated. I guess it's like raise your child the way you wish you had been raised. And it's also, again, goes back to acceptance that like no matter what you do, that your child is going to have problems as a child and as an adult. And that's just part of the nature of life. You just hope their problems aren't too big
right.
by being a good father, that they don't murder somebody or whatever, which is feels like it's pretty easy to instill.
Yeah. I mean, I think like I think if I came out okay, like I really do, I like the person I am. I think I have good values, and I think I treat people well. I think if my mother is obviously, we have a great relationship now, but if my father was like willing to talk and have real conversations like that, and instill actual change instead of like then just, you know, rewinding and it's the same issue a week later or 2 weeks later or whatever, I feel like I'd be fine. I wouldn't be pissed about my childhood, but now I'm pissed because I have, like, you know, no one to really make it to rectify it with.
Yeah, that's what's weird. And I talk about this a lot on this show, is that you can improve your adult life through whatever it is, therapy or asserting yourself or confronting and acceptance and meditation or prayer or Zoloft or whatever it is, but you can't fix whatever was lacking in your childhood. There's just no way to get that back. Like, even if your father apologized to you and obviously your mother already apologized to you, and you have a wife and you raise your son really well and you go to church or you meditate, whatever it is you do, you still are going to have that thing that is missing in you or hurting in you, because that's what happened when you were a child. You can't undo it. It's a bummer.
It's inescapable.
Yeah, it's in there. And that's what, like we talked about earlier, with your anxiety never dies or leaves you. It wants to survive. It's like all that pain from childhood is still there.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. My anxiety is something that I've learned to, you know, it's day to day. You learn to live with it, and you know, I change behavior based on how I'm feeling that day, or I change, you know, how I outlet. Sometimes if I'm feeling really fucked up, I'll exercise. I mean, I've attempted meditation before, but it didn't stick, and that's probably, you know, deep-seated excuses I'm making because I don't want to necessarily commit. There's all those things that come into play. But you know, what happens with me is sometimes my anxiety spirals so out of control that it turns to depression, and that depression then is locked in for a bit. You know, my rebound is quicker because of the tools I learned in therapy, but it still is like, you know, it's like, you ever see Neverending Story and he's walking the horse through that, you know, the quicksand and shit like that?
Yeah.
That's kind of how it feels when I'm like overwhelmed with anxiety, and I'm just, now it's turned into full-blown depression. It's like HIV to AIDS, except for sad.
Yeah, you get caught in a thought loop that you just can't get out of. And that's where meditation and mindfulness is really helpful, because you can recognize, like, oh, I'm on this loop and my thoughts are, you can at least maybe not break them, but recognize them, which starts the process of breaking those thoughts. Which I had another thought about that, and now I forget it. I was too mindful of that thought to remember this thought. Oh, fuck. It was something good too. It was like juicy. Wait, what were you saying right before that? Your anxiety goes into depression. Oh, this is what I was going to say, is when you have anger or sometimes even anxiety, of what it is you're you're reliving the thing that made you angry. Like, this is something I just learned recently listening to one of these interviews, or maybe I read it, but like, if you're mad all day, like this morning, for example, I was meditating, doing my morning meditation, and like the FedEx guy came and just held the ringer down, the doorbell, like, like that. And I was meditating, so it made it extra. You think it would make it better, but it like made it extra mad, because I was like in this like really calm place, and he just held it down, and I wanted to be like, you fucking asshole. You don't have to fucking, like, it just made me angry. And I sat back down to continue meditating. And I had this realization, or remembered, that when you stay mad at something, the thing is gone. The initial anger is like an impulse. He's holding the doorbell down. Why would you do that? That is like 5 seconds long. When you stay mad at it, it's because you're remembering that angry moment. Like, you're reigniting the fire yourself. That's you doing that. That's not him. Yeah. And so that's what happens when we get into these like funks, is like we're rethinking about the thing that was bumming us out, whether it be death or your mother yelling at you or your wife, you know, whatever. whatever it is.
Right.
So she burned dinner. Like you keep going back into your head about the thing, the actual moment. And it goes for the good too. Like when you do release your special or you shoot your special, the feeling of accomplishment only actually lasts like 5 minutes. Then you're just recalling, hey, I did that special.
Yeah.
That was cool. Remember I did that,
Yeah. Oh, I tried like hell to recall as much as I possibly could, but it's like, the same as social media. It dissipated really quickly, and then the panic of promoting it or the cuts and having to edit it and all those things pile up. Something that Vecchione said on your podcast that I really loved, and it put into words something that I experienced and didn't know, was operating from a deficit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
I loved that he said that. I didn't realize that I was doing a lot of uphill shit for no reason, where it's like you achieve something or even set out to do something, and then you just start listing those things that you have to get done, and it's already feels overwhelming, and the weight of everything can overtake you. And but instead just trying to start from zero. And I mean, dude, where's the joy? That was like a daily reminder in my calendar for like 2 years, because I was just trying to like, yeah, there should be joy. I'm doing what I love. I can support my family telling fucking jokes. Like it's ridiculous to even fathom, but like I need to constantly remind myself about that, instead of like, just stay on what I'm not doing and, who doesn't respect me, which again is like figments of my own imagination. But it's like that stuff of like, I need these people who I look up to vocally respect me. And it makes no sense.
Right. No. And it just torches you. And like I have moments like you talked about with like dying, the idea that like dying seems somewhat appealing because you can let go of all that. And it's like, you can accomplish that, I think, through meditation. But even if you don't want to do a meditation every day, just taking a moment to like focus on your breath, to like exhale and feel it, and to just be like, nothing matters right now in this moment. If I just focus on my breath, it doesn't matter who thinks what about me. And those things obviously come right back.
Right.
But the idea is to try to at least get it for 10 minutes, and that slows you down later on in the day. But if you just sort of let go of all that stuff, which is easier said than done, for just a few moments, you can at least have a few moments of peace, which hopefully people can do that right now.
Well, I think you may have said it, or I may have heard it elsewhere, but it was fuck, now I completely forget what I was just going to say. Never mind. Move on.
Fuck, I blew it. It's not like I want anything where someone says something, I said something brilliant, I need in there. We got to start to wrap up, by the way. I'm not looking at my phone. This is the recorder, and I paranoidly check to make sure it's recording. I don't want you to think I'm reading text over here mid-interview.
Oh, no. No worries.
But I feel like we could do another one of these. I feel like we didn't even get to really scratch into a lot of stuff.
I know. No, I agree. You're an easy talk, Joe.
Oh, thanks.
Always have been.
I enjoy covering. Well, yeah, I remember meeting you with her, Sean, and you guys were interning at Broadway.
Yeah, dude, I did everything for that club when I first started. I passed out flyers in Times Square. I sat people. I answered phones. I like blew Eric Hansen. It was, I did everything to get on stage there.
I forgot about that guy. It's funny, those early days. Well, that goes back to gratitude of like just feeling like we talked about, like shooting a special is such a good feeling, but even just gratitude, like I said earlier, like just getting out of bed, having 2 feet that work, and taking a piss. Like I was talking about earlier, just like eventually we'll take our last piss. Like that'll make you grateful for urinating. The idea that like at some point you're like, this is my last piss ever, which is weird. I don't know if that's depressing or inspiring or whatever, but that's where I'm at right now.
Well, my last piss is probably going to be just all blood.
Yeah, I mean that's the way it goes. I mean, this could be our last podcast. Who knows? This could be my last time sitting with a hot computer on my lap. I don't know why I'm not at a desk. I'm just slouching in bed with a hot computer on my balls.
It's where you feel most comfortable.
Yeah, I suppose so. I wanted to be in bed with you. Well, thanks for doing the pod. What's the name of the special? Plug the special.
Oh yeah, it's called Life Begins on YouTube, and I did it a little differently. I didn't I'm behind all you guys. So you guys have done hours, you've done half hours and stuff like that. I've never really done, I've done stand up on TV like once, just for access or whatever. I was going to do a late night, but long story short, that fell through, which was a wild source of anxiety and anger for several years because I kind of got ghosted. It was this whole situation. But so I wanted to do a special, but also I kind of wanted to give myself the out where I could do my first real special with a network, later on.
Yeah.
So this one, I made it kind of, a special thing where I got a bunch of my comedy heroes. I got Colin Quinn, Jim Norton, Bobby Kelly, Rich Voss, and Keith Robinson to be a part of the special and kind of do interstitial interviews where they just absolutely lace into me and trash me.
Yeah, it's
which
great.
is my favorite thing they do.
I watched it. It's great. And Sagalow's in there, and he was great.
He's so funny,
He
man.
was really fun. I mean, it's such a naturally funny guy, and it's awesome, and it looks awesome. So everyone go check it out. And I love the story you told me about you forgot to do the bit that it's named after.
Oh yeah, totally. I like, so weirdly enough, my father, who I hadn't spoken to at that point maybe in like 5 or 6 months, he still hasn't met my son, but which is maybe next time, but he showed up to my special without being like, I did not invite him. I would have told him not to come. He didn't tell anybody, and he ambushed me at my special and basically said what's up to me 2 minutes before I went on stage for my special. And I have to give myself credit because I really showed up for myself. I put that all out of my head. I got past it. I got, all the anger, all the it's like almost poison treats where you can then run into different corners of your brain and like really melt down. And then I totally self-sabotage, but I just locked all that shit up, stayed focused, really delivered like the first set really great. And then I got off stage and I was like, oh, I didn't do the title bit of the special.
That's amazing. Did you have to go back on stage, or you just got it on the second show?
I just got it on the second show. Both were sold out. I did a shitload of promotion to get people in seats because I'm so unknown, but both ended up being sold out. So I knew the joke would work, and I wasn't too worried about it.
That's awesome. Well, go check it out, everybody. It's on YouTube. It's free. And is there an album or what?
Yeah. Life Begins also. So the special has about 32 minutes of stand-up, and I wanted it to be almost like a business card for the full hour album. So, that album's out there to be streamed on Pandora, iTunes, whatever you want, and all the additional clips are also up on my YouTube. So Mike Cannon Comedy on YouTube. I have a ton of stuff up there and, putting out even more.
Hell yeah. Go check it out. Well, thanks for doing it, buddy. That was great. I've been wanting to have you on because I know you're a fucking nut. And no, it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. So thank you. That's Mike Cannon.
I appreciate it, man. I'm a big fan of yours, and you know that. But you were my first favorite comedian when I started doing stand-up comedy, and it's been awesome just to watch you take off.
Oh, thanks, man. That'll mean a lot to me for 10 seconds, and then I'll think you hate me. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for listening.